Dear students, welcome to Consumer Behavior class. So I believe this is the fourth class that we are together in this semester. As far as I remember, in the first class we discussed the syllabus. We go through the syllabus, and then starting from 3 weeks ago, we started to discuss in detail the consumer behavior topics. So, dear students, today, as you will remember, in the first week we made an introduction to consumer behavior. We understood the main concepts and terminology, and we discussed the internal and external influencers of consumer behavior, as you see in this table. And last week we started to discuss the first internal influencer on consumer behavior, which was the perception, right? We learned what is perception, how it is formed, how it is linked to marketing, and what are the factors or actors which influence the perception of consumers. This was the topic of last week. Now, today, we go on through this table and we will review and understood the learning and memory mechanisms. So, this week, we will do the first part of learning and memory, and next week, we will do the second part of the learning and memory. So, today's topic is the second step or second factor which influences the consumer behavior. It is learning and memory. So let's go on slowly what we mean by learning. First, we need to understand the meaning of learning for us. So how we define learning, what we mean by learning. If some external event or our experience, our personal experience, results in change, in permanent change in our behavior, this means that we are learning something. So we can define learning as the permanent change occurred as a result of some experiences, right? So this is the definition of learning in a simple way. So this learning can occur in several ways, not only just one way. So what type of ways we have in order to this learning to be occurred? So first of all, our personal experiences may lead some learning, right? We can learn through our personal experiences. So what are these personal experiences? If we think about, or if we think from marketing perspective, let's say that you are using a product or you are testing a product, right? So this is your personal experience with that product, and you learn something from that product. You learn how it looks, how it works, functions, and so this is a learning mechanism. You get some experience from that product. Of course, the personal experience is not the only way which learning takes place. We can also learn through our personal observations, right? So when we observe the outer environment, we can just, let's say, uh, learn something. If we talk about marketing and consumer behavior, think about you see some advertisements, right? Or not advertisements, but advertisement is stimulus, and we will see that. You see some people using some products, right? So you can learn by observing these people about some products and services or brands, right? So observing is an important source of learning, which may lead to change in our behaviors. So, for example, you see people talking to each other about the products, or they are writing on social media, or they are just using the products, and you observe them and understand how this product provide some benefit, value for these people, or what type of problems are solved by using this product, or what type of problems does this product create for the consumer. So observation is a good source of learning for us as consumers. The third way of learning something is to be exposed to a stimulus. You will remember from the perception class what was happening there. We were being exposed to some stimulus or stimuli, right? Stimulus is the singular, stimuli is the plural form of the word. Okay, so we become exposed to some stimuli. For example, we see some advertisement, right? Or we see some, let's say, we see some posters, right? Or we see some the stores, or we see some campaigns, social media messages, etc. So this is why it is very important. It is very important to understand. It is very important to understand the importance of the stimuli in shaping our learning process. So, in any case, by being exposed to the stimuli, we also let's say learn something. So learning takes place with three ways. First, personal experience. Second, observation. Third, being exposed to some stimuli. So as a result of these, we can learn something, and this may create a permanent change in our behavior. But learning is a dynamic process, is an ongoing process. So what we learn now is subject to change when we learn extra things in the coming days or months. So we always update our information and our behavior by the learning process. So learning process is always being updated by the new information, stimuli, observation, or personal experience. This is why learning is never stopping for consumers also. We learn new things about brands, we see competitive actions, and we increase the information and we keep learning about companies and brands. And this may lead to the changes in our consumption behavior, our brand preferences, or product preferences. This is very important. So this is why we always modify our behavior based on the continuous learning process through personal experience, observation, or the exposure to the stimuli, which is coming from the companies or brands. So what we have in our hands, generally we have two types of theories. One is a behavioral learning theory, and the other one is cognitive learning theory. These are not competing theories, but they are just looking to the same subject from different perspectives. So the academicians and researchers who work on the learning process of consumers created generally grouped under the two important theories, and they just contributed to the literature in the terms of these two theories: behavioral learning theories and cognitive learning theories. Both theories are trying to explain how learning occurs on consumers or on people. Okay, so we can convert these theories in the marketing area, and we can see how marketing people is using these theories or ways of learning to influence the decisions of people or learning process of people, consumers. So slowly, let's start with behavioral learning theories. Behavioral learning theories generally uh, assume that or indicate that the learning takes place as a reaction or responses to some external objects or even events. So, according to the behavioral learning theory, learning process is occurring or occurs as a result of our responses to the external events. So we see something and we learn. We are experiencing something and we learn from this experience. We observe something and we learn from this observation. We are exposed to some stimuli like radio advertisement, TV advertisement, and we learn something about the brand or company or the product itself. So this is behavioral learning theory. Again, there is also another thing which is important, that generally the behavioral learning theory is not focusing on the process, on the mental processes of learning. Generally, behavioral learning theory is focusing on the inputs and the outputs of the learning process, not the internal process. What I mean by internal process is the process which goes on in our, let's say, brain. Okay, so this is not the behavioral learning theories are focusing on. What they are focusing on, they are focusing on what type of inputs, like personal experience, observation, or stimuli we have, and what type of behavior do they do these stimuli, observation, or let's say personal experience resulting. So they are focusing on inputs and outputs, not the internal process of how learning takes place in the brain. No, this is not the topic of behavioral learning theories. Behavioral learning theories and academicians who follow or who study on these theories, they define the brain process of learning as the black box. Why they call it black box? Because we don't know 100% with 100% surety what's going on with this process. This is why it is very important. So, according to the behavioral learning theories, they are dealing with the, again, observable aspects of learning process. What is the observable aspect? The inputs that we receive before learning, like personal experience, observation, or stimuli. And another observable aspect of the process is our behavior. You can see that behavior or observe that behavior. So this is the two parts that behavioral learning theories focus on for learning process. So what about the marketing side? How marketing side uses this? It's very easy actually. When people get when people are exposed to some stimuli, for example, brand logo or products, then the learning takes place. So we are just taking inputs from the marketing area, like brand names, advertisement, or campaigns, jingles, any visual or sight or sound or let's say imaginary issues, they come as an input into our brain, and we create some responses, reactions towards these stimuli. Or we talk with people, we observe people, or we read the product comments, reviews on the social media, and we learn from these inputs, stimuli, or observations, and create our learning. So we change our behavior towards that brand due to the inputs that we learned about it, right? So When, for example, I see when I talk with a salesperson, it's a personal experience. When I talk to the salesperson of the brand in the store, if the service provided is good, then I have a good impression, right? Moreover, this is a learning about the brand. So I create a positive attitude toward the brand. This changes my behavior towards the brand. I create a positive attitude. Then I see some television advertisement about the same brand and I like it very much. Then again, a good salesperson, a good service, plus a nice TV ad creates a more positive feeling towards the brand. I learn this, right? So this way, I create somehow some connections about what I learn about the brand, and the totality of these connections and the things that I learn shape my behavior towards that brand or my attitudes toward that brand. Sometimes as a result of our actions, of course, we can get some rewards, nice things, or sometimes we face some unpleasant occasions or results. So, based on the result of our behavior, as I told you, learning is a dynamic process. So, as a result of our learning process and our behaviors, we may get some positive or negative feedback from outer environment or consequences. In this case, we update our behaviors based on the new things we learned as a consequence of our, let's say, behaviors, actions. Okay? So, as I told you, learning is a dynamic process in this respect also. Classical conditioning. So, under the behavioral learning theories, we have two important ways of creating a learning process. So, there are two ways which describe how the learning occurs uh, by behavioral learning theories. So, behavioral learning theories explain the process of learning in two ways. The first one is classical conditioning. This is the way how learning occurs. One way, which is explained by behavioral learning theories about how the learning occurs. So, under the classic conditioning way, generally, the learning of one person occurs when a stimulus which creates an immediate action of person is paired, matched, or connected with another stimulus which initially does not create any action at all. So the first stimulus which creates an immediate action is called unconditional stimulus. On the other hand, the second stimulus, which does not create any reaction on consumer, is called the conditioned stimulus. Okay? So when the unconditioned stimulus is matched, connected, paired with a conditioned stimulus or standard stimulus over a time, then what happens? Then the capability of creating an action, the capability of the unconditioned stimulus, the first stimulus of creating a reaction is transferred to the second stimulus, conditioned stimulus. Now, when I will give you an example from Pavlov, who is a very famous physiologist, we will understand the relationship between the unconditioned and conditioned stimulus and how the learning occurs under the classical conditioning. So, Pavlov is a physiologist and he demonstrated to us how the classical conditioning works create learning process. Pavlov has some dogs, okay? And Pavlov made an experiment on the dogs. So he tried to observe their behavior based on the stimulus provided. So what Pavlov did, first of all, he was giving, let's say, meat powder, like meat powder, to his dogs. Then when the dogs were seeing the meat powder, they started a salivation response. You know what is salivation? When they are hungry, their mouth creates salivation. Okay? So when dogs see meat powder, they start to salivate. Salivation process starts automatically. So according to the classical conditioning, a stimulus like meat powder, which creates an immediate reaction on the person or on the animal, is called the unconditioned stimulus. Okay? So unconditioned stimulus is the meat powder, which creates an immediate reaction. Pavlov used a second stimulus, which was a ring, okay? A ring, which makes sound, okay? So when Pavlov place a ring to let's say to create a sound, ducks do not salivate in the beginning, right? Because there's no meaning for ducks to hear the ring, the sound, and there is no anything related with meat or any type of food. So the ring is a standalone stimulus, and they don't know what is it for in the beginning, because when he placed the ring, there is nothing to be, or bell, let's say. When he rings the bell, there is nothing to do for the ducks, because it is not associated with anything else, any action. But when Pavlov started to connect these two stimulus in the food concept, then something started to happen. So what he did, he started to ring the bell first, then show the meat and give the meat powder to the ducks. So in the beginning, ducks were creating a saliva reaction when they see and smell meat powder. But there was no any reaction of saliva when they hear the bell sound, right? But when Pavlov connected these two stimulus together and first started to ring the bell and then give the meat powder, over time, these two stimulus, the first one is unconditioned stimulus, meat powder, and the second one is conditioned stimulus, which is the sound of the bell. They connected to each other in the context of food. So after some time, when Pavlov continuously did ringing the bell and giving the meat, then the dogs started to the salivation reaction when they hear the bell sound. But there was no need to show them the meat powder. So when they started to see the ring of the bell, they started to the salivation process. So this is how classical conditioning works. With unconditioned stimulus, we are connecting a third-party stimulus, which at the beginning is not related with the concept. But when they come together and applied at the same time, then these two stimulus are creating a link in the brain of the subject, and the subject starts to give the same reaction it gives to the unconditioned stimulus to the conditioned stimulus, like starting to the salivation when they hear the sound of the bell, even without hearing or without smelling the meat powder. So this is how classical conditioning works. So the response or reaction of dogs, which is the salivation, when they hear the sound of the bell, is called conditioned response. So the bell is the conditioned stimulus, and the response which give to the bell is called conditioned response. This is very important. So as you will realize, the classical conditioning way of learning is focusing on the physical and reflex-based reactions like salivation or eye blink, etc. So generally, classical conditioning way of learning is related with automatic, reflex-based reactions of people or animals. There is no any cognitive process. There is no thinking about something. It's an automatic response of the body. So it is autonomic and nervous system reactions. So classical conditioning is used especially to generate body reactions, like reflex-based reactions, like hunger, thirst. Okay, so these are the main issues related to classical conditioning. So, for example, we will see, but generally in marketing area, classical conditioning is widely used in advertisements and in any other media. Why? Because marketers try to combine their brand as a stimulus which itself it doesn't mean anything to the consumers, with some feelings or automatic responses, reactions, like in the Pavlov's example. So this is why when we see some brands, we feel something about, okay? When we see some brands, we may feel hungry or thirsty. When you see Coca-Cola, you feel that you are thirsty or you like to drink, right? So this is a typical example of classical conditioning. If Coca-Cola brand is not connecting to anything else, you will not feel anything. You will not give any reaction. Your body will not give any reaction. But the Coca-Cola brand is linked to something in your brain. This is why your body creates some reaction. Okay? So this is how classical conditioning is used. I will give you some examples in the coming slides. Now, so of course, you have to connect the unconditioned stimulus and conditioned stimulus, which is very critical. But what is critical is repetition. If Pavlov just one time rings the bell and gives the meat powder to the dogs, next time, if he just only rings the bell, they will not salivate. Why? Because repetition is important. The link between the two stimulus is not created in one just time. It needs a repetitive approach. Maybe Pavlov did this 10 times, 15 times, 20 times, 30 times. Then this connection is established, and the capability of creating a reaction of the unconditioned stimulus transferred to the conditioned stimulus, and conditioned response is generated. This is very important. You have to be sure about that. Repetition is very important. So this is why we need to create repetitive environment in order to make our connection stronger, to be sure that unconditioned stimulus will work and will generate a conditioned response. Another thing is related with stimulus generalization. Sometimes another stimulus, which is very similar to the bell, may create also the same reaction. So when a stimulus, which is similar to the bell, for example, in Pavlov's case, creates the same reaction or almost the same reaction, then we call this the stimulus generalization. I mean, using the similar stimulus is called stimulus generalization. And if this new stimulus, similar stimulus, creates the same reaction, then this effect is called the halo effect. Okay? So halo effect is defined as the reaction, is the output of the second stimulus, which is similar to the original conditional stimulus. This is called the halo effect. Okay? It makes a halo. And stimulus generalization is the process of using a similar stimulus to the conditioned stimulus, original conditioned stimulus. So if we use, instead of, let's say, a bell as conditioned stimulus, if we use not bell, but another thing, then this is called the condition, the stimulus generalization process. Now, what are the marketing applications of classical conditioning? So what we have, for example, as I told you, companies use classical conditioning to transfer the power, the reaction capability of the unconditioned stimulus to the conditioned stimulus. In this case, for example, let's think about a hamburger, right? So when we see a hamburger, we feel hungry. We want to eat it, right? So hamburger is like a meat powder in Pavlov's experiment. So hamburger is the unconditioned stimulus. So my brand, if I want people to feel hungry when they see my brand logo like McDonald's, what I do, I associate, connect, bridge, link the logo of McDonald's with a delicious hamburger, right? So unconditioned stimulus hamburger creates a reaction of hunger. In order to transfer this reaction capability to the conditioned stimulus, McDonald's logo, I need to connect these two stimulus in the advertisements, in marketing applications. So I need to show people McDonald's logo and hamburger together, right? When I repeat this process enough, in a sufficient number, then what happens? Then the McDonald's logo gets the capability of creating the same reaction that creates the unconditioned stimulus hamburger. So when people start to see McDonald's only, the logo only, they remember hamburger and they start to feel hungry and they want to eat something. Or French fries, potatoes, whatever it is. So what I did here, I create a conditioned stimulus, McDonald's, and I create a conditioned response, reaction of hunger. I don't need anymore to use hamburger picture or its smell, right? When I see the McDonald's logo, I immediately smell hamburger, right? This is the conditioned response and how it's used in marketing. So there are also some applications of stimulus generalization. What was the stimulus generalization? Stimulus generalization is using a similar condition stimulus, not the original condition stimulus, but a similar one. Okay, so generally we use stimulus generalization in the, let's say, in the marketing, branding, in the logos or brand extensions. So what we do actually, for example, we use very similar package because we know that that package is a conditioned stimulus and creates some reaction. If we use a similar package, the same reaction will be valid for that similar package also. We use licensing. Why? Because if I license my product with some famous brand like Walt Disney products, then when people see Walt Disney logo on my products, then what happens? They think that it's a high quality product. So the same reaction is created with my products through the conditioned stimulus of a brand. So these are the things that generally are used in terms of stimulus generalization. So the first one was classical conditioning. But there's also a second way of learning under behavior learning theory. What is it? It is instrumental conditioning. So instrumental conditioning, or one person learns through instrumental conditioning, or we call it operant conditioning also, when our behaviors result in some consequences. This can be positive consequences or negative consequences. So when our behavior results in some positive or negative consequences, our learning dynamically updates itself, and we are updating our information and we are updating our behavior based on this feedback we receive from the outer environment. So what does it mean? What does it mean this? So let's say that I have learned something through observation or exposure to a stimuli, or let's say with my personal experience with a product. Let's say that, for example, I have learned some information about the product from a salesperson. This is my personal experience with the salesperson. He explained me the product, he made a demonstration, and I tested the product in the store, and I liked the product. The learning took place, the learning process took place, and I had a positive attitude toward the brand, and I bought that product. It's very good. But when I bought that product, and when I used the product actually in my life, I didn't like the product, and it was not satisfactory because the product is broken in very short period of time. So I had a very bad experience with the product. So what I learned here is that the product is not a high quality product. So I revised because my behavior was purchasing the product, and the consequence of this purchase was an unsatisfactory experience. The product is broken. So this is why I now change my behavior, and I will never buy that product again. So this is a typical example of instrumental conditioning. The outcomes of our learning creates some new updates on our behaviors through learning process. Maybe you realize that in the let's say in the normally classical conditioning, The learning process was based on the reactions of the body, like automatic and nerve system reactions. There was no any cognitive process. But here in the instrumental conditioning, I update my behavior and I create my reactions. I update my reactions based on what? Based on based on the experiences that I get or feedbacks that I get as a result of my behaviors. So there is a small cognitive process. I learn something and I decide to do something. So there is a decision, there is a cognitive process. So this is very important difference between classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning. Instrumental conditioning involves somehow to evaluate something. This is very important. As you see in these pictures, instrumental conditioning is experiments are widely used in animals, on animals also. Animals learn through instrumental conditioning. When you give some when you give some special gifts to them, they start to repeat the same reactions and learn uh, to do the things in a right way. So this is how instrumental conditioning works. So under the instrumental conditioning, learning takes place in three ways: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment. So in the positive reinforcement, when you do something and you are, let's say, rewarded, you get a positive thing, a positive feedback, or something very nice happens, then it creates a more powerful reaction in the same way. It strengthens your reaction because it reinforces your behavior, because you are making a behavior and the outcome of this behavior results in a positive feedback from the environment, like a reward, right? Then uh, you associate with this reward with the specific behavior, and you start keeping to do the same behavior over time. So positive outcome is associated with a specific behavior, and unless you experience otherwise, you keep going, you keep doing the same thing continuously because you get rewarded or you feel good as a result of this behavior. This is positive reinforcement. The second one is negative reinforcement. The negative reinforcement, generally, your behavior results in some, let's say, inappropriate, let's say, situations. So you don't prefer this situation. Maybe unsatisfaction with a product, or maybe poor service, let's say. In these cases, you learn that your behavior is not the right behavior because it does not result in positive outcome. There's a problem. So this is the negative reinforcement. So you learn to change your behavior or create your behavior because there is something wrong with your decision, because it does not generate a preferred ideal outcome. So you need to change this behavior, and you learn with this negative reinforcement way. And finally, punishment, of course. Punishment, when your behavior results in situations which some unpleasant events occur. So in this case, these are not the ideal things, but very bad, unfortunate events, like losing some money or, I mean, whatever it is. So this type of unpleasant events, when they occur, this means that there is a problem with your decision. That decision should be totally changed because you should not do that behavior. This is the punishment. Okay, so this is also a way of making learning process under the instrumental condition. For example, if the dog do something wrong and you punish the dog learns not to do that, right? This is same example for punishment way of instrumental condition. Okay. Now, of course, in marketing, we use the examples again, instrumental conditioning. You will easily remember what type of things we use. For example, under the instrumental conditioning, we use rewards. When you buy a coffee, when you buy 5 copies, you get 1 free. This is a good way of instrumental conditioning. You are rewarding the person because of his or her actions, behaviors, purchases, right? So this is why frequency marketing applications are widely used in retail to make people keep buying because they will be rewarded. So they learn to buy because of the prices they receive. This is a positive reinforcement, right? Positive reinforcement. Gamification is also related with positive reinforcement. When you do something and it is gamified, you feel good, and it creates somehow some entertainment, and the rewards in the game it gives you some motivation to continue to purchase or make transactions. Or if you want to be a member of something, if it gives you prize, some reward, it motivates you to do that, right? So positive reinforcement is widely used in marketing. But also we can use this positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement in the advertisement, right? We can show people the consequences of making such behaviors or not making such behaviors. For example, let's analyze this advertisement. What you see in this advertisement. In this advertisement, we see this is the advertisement of a peppermint product. It's a mint product, right? You can see in the bottom right corner. This is a peppermint. So, or eucalyptus mint. Okay. So, what is this? So, what this advertisement tell us? This advertisement uses negative reinforcement. So it shows that if you don't consume peppermints, if you go to the doctor, dentist, your breath will smell so bad that even the dentist will stay alone from you. So in order to not be in such positions, unpleasant positions, just use this product. So here it tries to teach us, it tries to make people, consumers, learn to buy the product by showing them the absenteeism, the missing situation of the product in this case. As you see, it shows that in case of you don't use our product, you may be in such difficult situations. This is very important. And of course, under the behavioral learning theories, we saw classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning. One more theory is important. The second group of theory is the cognitive learning theories. Under the cognitive learning theories, the learning occurs through some cognitive steps in the brain. So cognitive learning theory focuses on the learning process, on the aspect of learning process in the consumer's mind or brain. So what we understand from cognitive learning theory, when we are exposed to some stimuli or we observe some stimuli, or let's say we just have a personal experience, these lead to some cognitive processes in our brain or mind, which lead to some learning activity and result in some behavior. So observational learning is one part of it. Generally, cognitive learning theory is cognitive learning occurs through observational learning. Okay, so this is very important. One way of learning is modeling. Under the cognitive learning theories, one way of learning is modeling. Modeling is the process of referencing or imitating or copying the behaviors of others. You have, for example, you can see a person. This person can be a reference for you, can be uh, a person can be which you imitate and which you credit most. You have nice feelings toward him or her, or you admire him or her, and you imitate his or her behaviors. So you use what he uses. You wear what they wear, or you go where they go. You follow them, you observe them, and you try to be like them. This is modeling, okay? It is important for you what they think, what they eat, how they live, where they visit, what type of car they use, or what business they do, etc. You are admiring these people, or you take them as a model. This is modeling. How modeling works under the cognitive learning theory. So how we learn to do things by modeling. First, we pay attention to a model behavior, of course, what this person is doing. Then we keep this in our mind, memory, okay, what he's doing in particular situations. Then we, if we need this information, this behavior, and if we have the ability to do that, then we become motivated to do that, and we do the same behavior. This is why, for example, companies, brands generally use their advertisements, famous people, celebrities, right? Because these people are admired by so many people and they follow these people. If they buy some products, they also buy the same products. This is modeling. This is very important. So when modeling works best, first, your target consumers, target market should be in line with your model selection. What does it mean? You have to select a model person which is suitable for your target market. He or she should be a person which is admired and followed by your target market, target segment. This is very important. The second one, what the model says is very important, and consumers should remember what the model, let's say, advises, recommends to them. Okay, you have to do this with marketing communications, and of course, you need to motivate your consumers' target segment to take some action, some campaigns. So, modeling is convincing your target consumers to do something by showing them an example of a person which they admire and proving that that person also uses the same product, etc. This is the way of using modeling in marketing. Yes, dear students, this week we discussed the first part of the learning and memory. Next week we will continue to the second part. Do you have any questions? Please ask. Thank you, dear students. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Those who do not fill the survey, please do it. I send a survey to you. Please fill out the survey.